Okie dokie. So for this, what you can do is you can just look at me the whole time.
Okay.
You don't have to look at the camera.
I'd rather.
I know it helps a little bit. So first off, you will just have you say your name and spell it. That way, make sure you get it right.
Okay, it's Jayme Waldron, Jayme Waldron.
Alrighty, and a certain position or title you
I'm an associate professor in biological sciences at Marshall.
Okie dokie. So first off, just kind of talk to me a little bit about what we're hearing out here right now.
Right now, we are hearing a chorus of spring peepers, a little tiny frog that makes a loud noise.
Okie dokie. Now, a lot of people associate these with springtime. You could just talk about why are they making this noise right now?
Because they're breeding. So spring peepers breed in the spring. They're called spring peepers because they're out here peeping in the spring. Only the males are chorusing right now. And what they do is they attract females to these choruses. And the choruses are loud, we think, because they're attracting females from the forest. So they spend the winter in the forest. They're only in the wetlands for the breeding season, which is now. It can be early if the weather's mild. It can be later if you have a really cold winter. But they're typically one of the first. Then with wood frogs, we're not hearing any wood frogs right now, and leopard frogs, they call really early here in southern West Virginia. So it's really nice because they're a signal of what's to come, nice weather. But they're one of the first, and everybody recognizes them as the frogs they heard growing up because they're a pretty common frog and they have a pretty wide range.
How long do they make this sound for?
It can be extended. It can be a month and a half. It'll start slowly. You know, you'll first get males coming into the wetlands from the forest before the females arrive, and they chorus like this. And what they do, and it's hard to tell from hearing, from just standing here, but they're calling in duets or even triplets. So sometimes you'll hear like a trill starting it out. Occasionally you'll hear a trill in there instead of a peep, and that basically means that a male is going to start duetting or have a triplet with a couple other males. It amplifies their sound, and they don't call at the same time. So when they're doing that, one male will be peeping, and then another male will come in and start peeping in the gaps between the peeps of another male. That's why it's so loud.
Things you hear every night your entire life, don't know or think about.
Oh yeah. It's subtle, but it's deafening. You wait till it gets dark here, and they're not going to care that we're here. It's going to be even louder. It can hurt your ears.
So what happens to after the peeping kind of stops? What happens to them then? Like as the females get back to kind of the wooded areas?
So what happens is the females are going to lay their eggs, and so the males are attracting them in. And actually, what the spring peeper female will do is she'll come up and actually nudge a male when she selects him, and they'll go into what we call amplexus, axillary amplexus, and he holds on to her until she starts ovipositing her eggs, and then he fertilizes them as she's doing that. And then they abandon it. The male might continue to call and breed with other females, but the female will lay her eggs. They're singly laid. They can also, sometimes there'll be two or three, like little tiny masses, but they're not like a giant egg mass that you see in a pond when you're a kid and you're out looking for frogs or salamanders. They're singly laid, and so they're small, and they're usually attached to some sort of vegetation near the bottom. So you can find them, but it takes a little effort. And then they'll hatch. Depending on the temperature of the water, that determines when they hatch. If it's warm water, they'll hatch more quickly than if it's cold water because they develop more quickly in warm water. And so they hatch out, if it's, 10 to 14 days probably on average. And then they're little tadpoles. They're larval frogs. They don't look like a frog at all. They're a tadpole. And then they'll remain in that phase, for a few months until they metamorph into tiny little froglets. And they're still juveniles. And then they come out and they leave the wetlands. And then they'll start breeding sometimes the summer after they morph into frogs, or usually 2 summers later is when they actually first breed. But so yeah, that's what's going on right now. So they're laying their eggs. They're going to hatch into little tadpoles. They'll be abandoned by their parents. There's no parental care, and then when they leave the water, they go into the forest, into terrestrial habitats. And that's where they're hard to find. In the summer when it's hot, they don't like it hot. But this is when they're easy to find, when they're breeding.
So how many, per breeding, how many usually survive?
Not many. No, it's a great food resource for birds, for fish. Other amphibians will eat them, especially when they're eggs. Newts love to eat eggs, and they're an amphibian, they're a salamander. So survival's poor, but they lay thousands, and not one individual, but actually one female will lay over 1,000 eggs, a large female will. Yeah, so if you think about how many females are out there relative to the number of males we're hearing, think about the millions of eggs. So, I don't know what the survival probability is. I bet it's 20. This is me guessing, about 20%. So, and then they get eaten when they're leaving the water too. It's a great food resource.
That's good. So you could just kind of talk about, like this, like you described as marshes. This is kind of area you'll find them at.
Yeah, ideally they like wetlands that go dry, but the wetlands need to hold water for about 4 months because that's about how long it's going to take them to complete the entire life cycle. So from the breeding period to laying the eggs and the hatching and then developing and going through metamorphosis. And so that's typically open, no canopy. They like it open, wetlands that will hold water for at least 4 months. Now, green bottom here, the water is more permanent. But if you notice, the frogs are in the more shallow areas, away from the fish. But ideally, it dries up completely. That's perfect spring peeper habitat.
Okey-dokey. So like I just said, I've heard these things every night my whole life, and I never knew why they were calling or anything else about them. If you could just talk a little bit about how, for the general population, this is outside the door and they don't know about it, and why it would
That's a shame.
It'd be nice just to take interest and learn about something.
People who grew up in West Virginia are lucky for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that we have incredible amphibian diversity. You can't get the diversity of amphibians and reptiles, well, mostly amphibians, our reptile diversity is not that great, that you get here. Amphibians like it cooler. They like a lot of water. We live in a rainy place, and to not experience it means that you're missing out on your natural heritage. You grew up here, you should be familiar with the animals that live around you and grow an appreciation for them and a love for them. And if you take your kids out, and this is what happened to me, I grew up on a couple acres that had a pond, and I lived in the pond when I was a kid. So take your kids out there, let them experience it, and then they'll love it forever. They really will, because it's really cool to hold a spring peeper in your hand and to hear them every spring. Makes you feel good. The warm weather's coming.
That was perfect.
Okay.
Trying to think, is there anything else been interesting you'd like to add that I didn't think to ask?
It's hard for me to guess. I don't know much about Green Bottom, its history, so the location. Yeah. I think there are 14 species of frogs in West Virginia. I said diversity. That's pretty good. But I don't know. I'm not good at that type of thing.
Oh no, that's fine. I got what I got was great. I was
Okay.
just seeing